This week in South Florida, David Beckham and his team unveiled their vision of a new Major League Soccer stadium. Designed by famed Arquitectonica, it swoops and curves and shows off the Miami skyline as seen from Port Miami. But does it make sense to put it there? Is a soccer stadium compatible with cargo liners and cruise ships? We'll ask some leading members of the Beckham team and a Miami commissioner whose district includes the port. Plus, your letters and my personal perspective about a group opposed to same-sex marriage whose arguments against it are way over the top. Stories people are talking about this week in South Florida.
Good morning. Glad you could join us. We have certainly had a share of problems with sports stadiums here in recent years. Take it back to the Marlins. They got their new $500 million home paid for mostly with tax dollars. And then Steve Ross finally gave up on getting tax dollars to renovate Sun Life Stadium, but he still wants a big break on property taxes. In the wake of those bad memories, along comes soccer superstar David Beckham with his new Major League Soccer franchise and plans to build a stadium at Port Miami. There are other sites under consideration, but Beckham clearly is interested in only one of them, land on the southwest corner of Port Miami. Beckham hired world-famous architectural firm Arquitectonica to design the stadium, and it looks wonderful, great views of the field and of the Miami skyline. But is the port the best place to put a soccer stadium? That is our focus this morning with some guests who are trying to answer that question. Let me introduce them to you. Mark Sarnoff is a veteran Miami City Commissioner. His district includes Port Miami, and he has some influence in the decision-making process. Neeson Kasdan is a prominent Miami attorney who is part of the Beckham team. He is also a former mayor of Miami Beach. And Bernardo Fortbrescia is an architect and the co-founder and principal of Arquitectonica. The firm has designed iconic buildings here and around the world, and it designed this new soccer stadium. To all of you, good morning.
Good morning.
Great to have you come in. We'll get to the stadium in just a second, but Commissioner Sarnoff, let me ask you about this ugly incident at the Ultra Music Fest where a security guard was nearly trampled to death. Should this be the end of Ultra Fest in Miami?
Well, both the mayor and I think it should be. It is impossible, Michael, to manage 100,000 people and have pinch points like we do and have this flimsy fencing. We've been playing with nitroglycerin for years, and we got away with it for a couple of years. You know, in 2011 is about when it became this size of an event. And we've had incidents for the past couple of years. For instance, last year we had people try to stampede the front gate.
Yeah.
But luckily we had 16 police officers on bicycles that put their bikes across their chests and pushed back.
Yeah. Well, didn't that result in some new procedures, security procedures there? You would think it would have.
And you would have expected it to, but unfortunately Ultra continues to want to use private security because it's a significant reduction in their expenses.
Yeah.
And instead of using more and more police officers. But candidly, I mean, we don't even have enough police officers to handle that volume of people in that circumstance with that kind of fencing.
Yeah, well, the sworn officers in the city of Miami are 1,100, I believe, something like that.
Correct.
And of course, this Ultra Fest now is attracting, what, 150,000 people over a 3-day period. Isn't it, you know, the argument in favor is that it, at a well, not a slow time of year. March is a busy time for tourism and events. I mean, the tennis tournament is just wrapping up today out on Key Biscayne. But it brings lots of people to town, fills hotels and restaurants. Isn't there an argument to be made for that?
Well, I'm sure there's an argument to be made for making money, but at what cost? And at what cost to the businesses, and at what cost to Erica Mack? Because Erica Mack will now have traumatic brain injury, or at least it appears she will. Our hearts and prayers go out to her. But at what cost, Michael? You can't safely put this event on. It is virtually impossible.
Yeah,
you cannot have 85% of the people intoxicated, not listening to legitimate police commands because they're not capable of doing so.
Yeah. Well, when this was the Winter Music Festival, it was at Bicentennial Park. It was certainly of a different kind and magnitude than it is now. All right, on to the stadium here. First, Bernardo, let me congratulate you and your Arquitectonica team. You designed, I think, a beautiful stadium. I'm no expert on sports stadia, but it's a great looking stadium. Let's put some pictures up on the screen just so if people at home have not seen what you have designed. Tell us about what you have designed.
The stadium has a very large civic plaza in front for gatherings of fans and public. It has steps that take you down to a bay walk. It is connected through what will be an equivalent of a High Line back to downtown Bayside and mass transit. The stadium within it is unique in the sense that if all of us remember the Orange Bowl and how you looked out to the skyline of the city with those palm trees. I certainly
remember, yes.
And imagine this having the same effect of an opening, viewing out to the skyline and the waterfront, in this case, even better. Yeah. And so I think the stadium is a very tropical and very Miami stadium.
Yeah. Neeson Kasdan, you have a lot of expertise in urban planning beyond your legal expertise. Why is Port Miami really the #1 choice for the Beckham Group?
Well, it's really a brilliant location, and it works very well. I have to understand, we have the good fortune of having David Beckham, the most iconic sports figure in the world, and his partner, business partner, Simon Fuller, one of the greatest marketers in the world, who created American Idol. They have said they love Miami. They could locate their team anywhere they want in this country. They've chosen Miami because of the beauty of the city and because of the unique characteristics of the city. For it to work from their perspective, they need to have a spectacular location. The proverbial blimp shot, so where you're looking and you see this beautiful stadium set against the bay at the downtown skyline. We studied many sites, and some are still under consideration.
Yeah, but there's really only, but Neeson, there's really only one site that David Beckham continues to talk about, and that is the port. And the port itself, Mark Sarnoff, I want you to jump in here, but the port itself has plans for that property for a 7 million square foot office condo development, and the proceeds of Miami-Dade County and the Port of Miami would certainly profit from that development. I mean, do you think, however, that particular proposal is too much for that site?
Oh, it's so anti-competitive behavior by the county should they approve that, because you're creating a significant benefit to people who would go out to the port if this 7 million square feet existed. And bear in mind, Michael, there is not even 7 million square feet of commercial on north of the river. So you're going to depress the private real estate market, and you're going to have the competitive advantage of not paying your real estate and not paying your real estate taxes. So if it's a three-legged stool, 2 of the legs are free. Yeah. So you're going to be able to pass on to the consumer a much more competitive below market rate rent. Yeah. And you're doing so under the guise of paying off a huge debt that you've incurred at the port.
And Neeson, what you and Mr. Fort Brescia and David Beckham and your team are proposing is about 1 million square feet. Isn't that right,
well,
Bernardo,
here's
in that area?
What's being proposed is the stadium. The mayor would like the whole southwest quadrant to be master planned. Now remember, 2 years ago...
You mean Mayor Jimenez?
Mayor Jimenez. 2 years ago, the port master plan said that those 22 acres could not be used for port purposes due to channel depth and its location. And so they wanted to do something else that would be beneficial to the port in the long run, economically beneficial. We believe, as does Mayor Jimenez and others we've been working with, that entire site should be master planned, which would allow some room for additional commercial development, probably hotels and some limited retail, that would be compatible to downtown and not competitive with downtown, connected by that beautiful pedestrian bridge. Yeah. We just the point is, we think that this will bring tremendous cachet and identity to the port and result in the port receiving more revenue in a shorter period of time than the grandiose plan that Commissioner Sarnoff is talking about.
Bernardo, I know you are an architectural firm, not a traffic study firm, but how do you get, say, 18,000, 20,000 people a night to a soccer stadium at Port Miami? They're not all going to walk across the pedestrian bridge. which I've seen, and it's not in use now. You want to turn that into a linear park, a green space, a High Line kind of thing?
Well, the team that has been leading this effort retained a prominent traffic and parking analysis company, a civil engineering firm with a lot of experience, and did a very thorough study of the available parking spaces and the traffic at the time and day of the game, which is how you have to see it. The game is never happening at rush hour, or for example, 7 million square feet of office would conflict. It never happens, the arrival of the fans at the same time as the arrival or departure of passengers of the cruise ships.
Yeah.
And we looked and we found at that moment that there are 2,500 unused parking spaces in the port, and additional equivalent within 7 minutes walk across the pedestrian bridge in downtown, totaling 10,200 parking spaces unutilized.
All right, so you believe it's possible. Of course, I would say that in August, September, we have late afternoon rains, early evening rains here, and getting people out of their cars, Commissioner, walking across a pedestrian bridge is changing culture. It's changing attitudes.
Well, I mean, I'm a big High Line fan. It's the greatest, I think, event you can go to in New York, or the greatest tourist attraction. This time it would not just be the High Line, it would be crossing water. I think that would be a very special...
It would be beautiful. It would.
Well, Michael, I'd like to add an important fact. We're about to open...
Can you add your fact after we take a break? We have to sell some products. So take a minute here.
Yeah.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with our guests.
This week in South Florida. Thanks for watching.
Welcome back on this Sunday morning. We are live in our studio talking with three interesting guys about a soccer stadium. Mark Sarnoff, Miami Commissioner, Neeson Kasdan, attorney, former Miami Beach Mayor, and Bernardo Fort-Brescia. Bernardo, you were going to make a point. I think, among other things, you were going to say that you're not going to have soccer games. How about on nights that the Miami Heat play? Is it going to be a schedule conflict?
No. Well, there's a well-coordinated schedule where there will never be a coincidence between a Miami Heat game and a soccer game, and that, in any event, is a season that hardly crosses into each other.
Yeah.
I'd also like to point out that we're about to open a new tunnel into the port with a capacity of 6,000 cars per hour, and that we have within 7 minutes mass transit access into the site. And I think those two are important points, and the idea of a march to the game, which Seattle has so successfully created and sustains it.
And they do this in Europe as well. Neeson, tell us about the funding for this. How much is this stadium going to cost?
Well, we're in the process of doing a very detailed, thorough examination of the cost. We'll know that shortly. The funding will be, as has been said, it will involve no county funding, no city funding. We are seeking the same sales tax treatment as other stadia.
$2 million a year,
right.
Which every other sports stadium in the state gets. But, you know, as the Miami Herald pointed out in an excellent front page article today, virtually, if other cities haven't used tax funds, they have built infrastructure. And maybe that is a good trade-off. But, Mark, wouldn't you expect there to be some infrastructure investment on the part of the city, your city, and Miami-Dade County?
Well, I think that that's on the table, but I would candidly say to these guys, don't give somebody a stick to hit yourself with. So why not go out there and say, we're going to do it all? Why not go out there and say, you know, this is what we're going to present to the city. There's no taxes. There's no infrastructure needs. You know, if it's
all gain, it's all benefit.
Yeah. Why say we need your $1 million? Because the inevitable number they're coming up with is in the $250 million range, and I don't pretend to know the whole thing. But you know, you hear this little bit of money that they need from counties or cities, and you know, the county's cash-strapped, the city's in a slightly better position. Why not just come out and say we're going to do it all?
All right. Well,
but if I may, though,
very quickly.
Part of what's driving, of course, the location is the existence of the infrastructure, the parking, the walking access,
right.
and
the tunnel
and the tunnel.
to the port.
That reduces the costs for developing the site. Other sites you'd have to import all this infrastructure.
Well, we won't. Today is not a discussion of the other sites, but I don't know. Anyway, we are out of time. I want to thank you all for coming in this morning. Next time, let's get David Beckham in here.
Absolutely.
Okay, he is back in London, I think. All right, gentlemen, thank you. Up next, we are going to open the mail.
Always goes
All right, on to the mail now. The prospect of a Major League Soccer team in Miami playing at that new stadium is the subject of this email from Barry White of Miami. He actually lives in Kendall. He says, we draw carpetbaggers from the whole planet with deals no one could possibly refuse. Let Mr. Beckham use one of our existing facilities, and when he has a steady following of 28,000 fans, we'll talk about a suitable location and a tax structure that generates appropriate revenue for us. The governor's pledge to spend $80 million on cancer research is seen with skepticism by Millie Herrera of Kendall. She says the lady shaking her head in disbelief behind Rick Scott when he was mumbling awkwardly about giving millions to cancer research echoes the distrust we all have about this clueless, mean-spirited governor. We don't believe anything you say, Scott. Our interview here last week with Charlie Crist, who is running for governor, brought this email from Elisa Toruño. She says Charlie, as well as most media outlets that malign Governor Scott, omitted to mention that Scott is not costing taxpayers a penny as he is working without pay. Would Charlie do the same if he elected? We also heard from many supporters of Democratic gubernatorial candidate Nan Rich of Weston. This email is from Randy Fleischer of Davie. He says Nan Rich has been campaigning and being mostly ignored by you for over 2 years. Please give Nan equal time. Well, the equal time provision was struck down by the FCC years ago, but yes, Nan Rich will be our guest next Sunday on this program. Still to come, my personal perspective about overheated rhetoric on gay marriage. This time it was just way over the top. Before we leave you this morning, a personal perspective about some overheated and offensive language we heard this week about gay marriage. It happened at a news conference on Friday called by a group called Pulse. People United to lead the struggle for equality. That's a worthy goal. I think the group is mostly sincere, but over the years, it hasn't worked so much to ensure equality for all as to see to it that gay people don't get their share of equality. This news conference was called to announce a lawsuit to intervene in a case brought by 6 gay couples here who want to marry. Here's what the leader of Pulse had to say.
71% of African Americans understand that same-sex marriage equates to genocide for us. They're not talking about that, but same-sex marriage equates to genocide. Besides taking our voter rights, it's going to kill us all.
That is Nathaniel Wilcox. Gay marriage is going to kill us? Oh, please. Look, reasonable people can and do oppose marriage between people of the same sex. Some people think homosexuality is a sin. Okay, we get it, and we respect the right of people to say so. But genocide, gay marriage is going to kill us, that kind of language is wrong and offensive. No person, no group is going to die if people of the same sex are able to marry. To say they will is ridiculous, ludicrous, and homophobic. That's my perspective for this week. Hope you have a great Sunday. Remember, as always, stay informed, get involved. I'm Michael Putney.